So the White House says President Trump's meetings with Benjamin Netanyahu and Volodymyr Zelensky were, quote, positive and productive. Mr. Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister ahead of the funeral service for Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, their pair's relationship has appeared strained in recent weeks, but Mr. Netanyahu says today's meeting was, quote, one of the best conversations they've ever had. Earlier in the day, Mr. Trump met with Ukrainian President Mr. Zelensky, and he says they discussed Ukraine's access to Patriot missile interceptors and restarting diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Aaron David Miller is a former State Department Middle East negotiator. He's now a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He joins us now. David, good to see you. As you know, we're parse the legacy of Senator Graham, and he's been so involved in these two conflicts around the world now. Benjamin Netanyahu in town for the funeral. Netanyahu, in my opinion, needed that photo opportunity with Donald Trump to bolster his election prospects. He didn't get it, did he? I mean, his presidency may be able to release a still, but they did not open it to the press. There you go. We see it from the Israeli Prime Minister's office. There you go. Pretty predictable. But he didn't get the open press moment that he wanted. Do you think that he perhaps has more tension with the president than people realize?
Interesting question, but there were no pressers, no public events with either Zelensky and Netanyahu. The hours before the president eulogized a man, Lindsey Graham, who has championed a very robust U.S. policy toward Ukraine and an even more robust U.S. policy toward Israel. I mean, I hate to use the word propriety in close proximity to the Trump administration. Having worked and voted for Republicans and Democrats, you can consider it a partisan comment if you want. But my view is it would not have been appropriate. Pressers can go in any number of ways, and usually you don't have them when you have nothing to announce. They sometimes don't occur because there are fundamental differences. The meetings were really bad, or there's a concern somehow that they would go sideways. I think under the circumstances, given the nature of their relationship, this visit turned out about as well as Benjamin Netanyahu could have. And remember, it's not a one-off. His objective with Trump in the next 90 days, where he will face the most consequential election of his political career, which could involve his freedom. He's on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court, right, for 5 years and running before 3 judges in Jerusalem. If he's convicted, if he loses power, he could be convicted or be forced into a plea agreement that would end his political career. So he needs Donald Trump to set up election headquarters in Washington and to basically campaign for him. Will Trump do it? He's avoided endorsing Netanyahu strenuously in the last several weeks. I don't know, but I think the prime minister comes and goes. It's not a loss. Could have been better, but with Trump and a presser, you never know. It could have been worse.
You make such a good point there. Before we let go of that issue, on Iran in general and the fact that Israel and the United States have had some tension, do you believe that really this is going, Donald Trump will call the shots from here on in, as he says he will?
Well, you don't need me. You're the star analyst here. I mean, you broke the code on Benjamin Netanyahu's main objective in the meeting, and now I think you broke the code on this one. Look, Trump is a senior partner. Netanyahu may have played a huge role in starting this war, but he is not going to play any kind of consequential role in ending it. And Trump has made that unmistakably clear. I would venture to say that it would be galactic foolishness on the part of the prime minister to lecture the president or press hard for a resumption of a war that the president wants to get out of. So what Netanyahu is hoping is that the supposed deal that the Omanis and the Gulf Arabs are cooking up, which the Iranians have not accepted. It's a deal that would open the straits on terms that Iran would accept and terms that the administration would accept. I'm thinking that Netanyahu is hoping that that's going to crater and that sooner or later, Trump will have no choice to return to military strikes. I mean, I hope that's not the case, but I think that's what That's what his play is.
Before I let you go, I will correct the record. I am no star analyst. In fact, you were looking at the person who said that Putin would never invade Ukraine, and here we are. That would be from looking at the whites of his eyes and his soul, apparently, when he first took office. But I do want to get your opinion on Zelensky himself, because despite his problems at home, he is in a stronger position here, isn't he?
I think so. I mean, I think it's no longer up for grabs that after we're in the fifth year of this war, that Ukraine has withstood and will continue to withstand Russian pressure. Putin is going to continue to try, but long-range drone strikes, activities in the Black Sea region, the fact that this administration is warming to some degree to Zelensky, co-producing patriots, that may be in the works. That's a longer-term play. But I think despite the sort of musical chairs with respect to the commander of the Russian force of the Ukrainian forces and the Minister of Defense, I think Zelensky came and went, and yes, I think things are looking much better. And I would only point out that in almost 5 years, Putin has not broken Ukraine in 5 months. We're now beginning the 6th month is today of this war. Trump has not broken Iran. And you got to wonder what Putin, having watched these great powers wrestle with these smaller ones, what President Xi is thinking about whether or not what he's witnessed in Ukraine and Iran advances his risk readiness on Taiwan or retards it.
Interesting. These two conflicts might be a measure of deterrence, besides the aggressive posture, some would say, that China has taken with their military exercises. Aaron David Miller, we covered a lot in 6 minutes. I really want to be covering peace treaties with you on both of those conflicts sometime soon. We'll continue to stay in touch. Appreciate it.
At some point, I'll interview you.
Take care.